Lumix cameras are known for having fantastic image stabilization. There are a lot of options to understand though, and I want to take you through them all. Under the second video menu, first page, and then image stabilizer, you'll find all of your options. Let's start with the operation mode. I'm currently in video mode, and so I only have two options. I have normal and off. The auto mode is not available right now, and that's because that is specifically for shooting still photos. The auto mode, as the description says, is for panning. The camera automatically detects when you're panning left or right or up and down, and it stabilizes accordingly. This isn't available in video because in video it's expected that you're going to be moving quite a bit more, so it's just not available. The normal mode handles what you need for video. The grayed out option, when to activate, is also for still photography only. In still photography mode, you can change it from always to when the shutter is half pressed. That'll allow you to conserve some battery where the stabilizer is not active when you're not actively shooting photos. The next three modes are all for video only. E-stabilization by default is off, but you have several options in here. And depending on the camera model you have, you may not have all of these. The first mode, cropless, is only available on the newer Lumix cameras. This is an enhanced digital stabilization that somehow manages not to crop into the image. So let's just take a step back for a moment and explain how digital stabilization generally works. The idea is that the sensor will crop into the image just a little bit so it has unused space to move the image around digitally to counteract any movement from the camera. The more you crop into the shot, the more you can stabilize, or conversely, the more you want to stabilize, the more you have to crop into the shot. This mode here, cropless, doesn't do any cropping and yet still manages to do digital stabilization. The next mode is standard. This one does crop a little bit, which is really good for slower walking shots. The top mode though, called high, is kind of ridiculous. It's almost like having a gimbal on your camera. It is so smooth, you can actually walk and even run to a degree with the camera handheld, and the shots will look amazing. Boost IS video is a pretty special one. This mimics a tripod, really. You can handhold the camera and it will feel like it's on a tripod. If you try and move the camera at all, you'll kind of feel the sensor, the stabilizer, fighting you to keep it stable. This is designed for a static shot where you wish you had a tripod, but you didn't bring one with you. This works best on wider angle lenses. If you go into longer focal lengths, it's not quite as effective. The last option is anamorphic. If you're shooting with anamorphic lenses, you definitely want to choose the correct squeeze ratio for the lens that you're using. This adjusts the stabilization algorithm to compensate for the odd squeezing that you have on anamorphic lenses. If you don't enable this and you're shooting anamorphic, you'll see some weird jiggling on the sides, so you definitely want to choose the right one. The last option on here is lens information, and it's not currently available because this only applies when you have mechanical lenses on the camera. I'm going to make a dedicated video about this because this one's really important and has its own setup. Now let's look at how to install the update. First of all, you'll need to download it from the official Panasonic website. To get there, you can go to photojoseph.com/Lumix update. That will redirect you, or simply Google search for Lumix firmware update download. This is what it looks like, and you should see your camera listed. Once you've downloaded the file and extracted it to a .bin file, take a freshly formatted SD card, pop that in your computer, and copy the .bin file to the root level of your SD card. Pop that card back into your camera, open the menu and navigate down to the wrench menu, and then further down to the others page, and then finally to firmware version. From here, you should see the firmware update is available. Just press the button to start it, choose yes to start, and let it go. Once the update is completed, you can go back into the firmware version and verify that it has updated, in my case to version 1.1 for this Lumix S1 Mark II. There's a setting in your Lumix camera called Image Area of Video that allows you to change how much of the image sensor you're using when recording video. If you're shooting micro four thirds, the options are going to be full and pixel for pixel. And if you're shooting full frame, the options will be full, APS-C, which is an APS-C crop, and pixel for pixel. Let's talk about why you might want to switch between them and when the camera might do it for you. This is the Lumix S1 Mark II, and here you'll see that I have the image area of video options of full, APS-C, or pixel for pixel. First of all, let's just talk about what this actually is. When it says full, it's using the full sensor width, whatever size sensor you have. That means every pixel that's available is being used. Regardless if you're shooting open gate in 6K or just 1080p, it's still using the entire sensor width and then scaling it down to the size that you actually need. With the crop option, you can tell it to use less of the sensor. Why would you want to do that? Well, in some cases you choose to, but in some you have to. So for example, on the S1 Mark II, there aren't a lot of options that force you into a crop. However, if I scroll through here, you'll see that there's a couple where it says APS-C. Since this is a top-end camera, there's not that many modes that do crop in. On some of the other cameras, you'll find more modes that crop in, especially when you get into the higher frame rate options. But there's a reason you may want to do this. Let's just say that I'm zoomed in as far as I can go, but I really want to zoom in a little bit tighter. Well, since I have more resolution than I need, 6K wide, but I only need 4K, I can actually crop into the sensor without sacrificing quality at all. And the way that I can do that is by going into the menu and changing it from full to APS-C. And now you'll see how much more I've cropped in. And again, I'm simply cropping off unneeded parts of the sensor. I can go even further. If I go in here and set it to pixel for pixel mode, it'll go just a little bit farther. Barely a difference there because at 4K width, we're almost exactly at 1:1 on the sensor. However, if I was shooting HD, then going 1:1 would give me an even bigger crop. I'll go in here and set the resolution to HD. And now at 1:1, I've zoomed way in. I have a much tighter crop available when shooting 1:1 in full HD. There's another reason that you might want to do this. Some lenses, especially many anamorphic or higher-end cinema lenses, are actually designed for a smaller sensor than full frame. They're usually designed for either APS-C or Super 35. And Super 35 is close enough to APS-C that we'll call it the same. Let me show you what I mean. I don't own a lens that isn't full frame, so I'm going to kind of fake it with this to show you what would happen. As you can see here, I'm not getting any vignetting on the sensor, but I'm going to rotate the lens shade so that it actually gets in the way of the shot. Let's just pretend that the lens was not giving me the full field of view, and this is what I saw through the viewfinder. Now I need to crop past that. Well, to do that, I would go in and set it to APS-C, and that would crop past the vignetting. So if you're using a mechanical lens that is designed for a smaller sensor, you can choose to use a smaller part of your sensor so you can still use that lens. There are two settings in your Lumix camera that'll turn any Panasonic zoom lens into an even longer zoom lens than it actually is. And those are crop zoom and hybrid zoom. The zoom lens that I have on here right now is a 24 to 60. Back into the menu, you'll find hybrid zoom and crop zoom. Let's start with crop. If I push that up arrow, I'm actually cropping into the sensor. As discussed in the image area of video, the Lumix camera allows you to crop into the sensor, not going past 1:1, allowing you to get more focal length out of a lens. Well, that's exactly what this is doing here. It's just doing it with this rocker instead of having to change it from full frame to APS-C crop. So by moving the arrow up and down, I'm essentially cropping into the sensor. If I push left or right on the rocker, it'll zoom all the way out or all the way back in. And if I go into the settings, I can actually change the speed at which that zooms. But going into this menu each time to make a change is definitely a bit tedious. So what you want is something on screen that you can call up at any time and drag it up and down to do the crop. And you can do that by going into the gear menu, then to operation and touch settings, and enabling the touch tab. Once the touch tab is enabled, I can now zoom in and out by simply dragging my finger up and down on the LCD. The more interesting version of this, however, is hybrid zoom. Hybrid zoom does the same thing that crop zoom does, except that it handles it automatically. As you rotate the zoom lens, it gradually crops in, giving you a consistent crop from its widest field of view to its tightest plus the crop. I'm going to turn this on and zoom all the way back out. And again, you see here, we're starting at 24 millimeters. As I zoom in, it just seamlessly zooms all the way to 93. But again, this is a 24 to 60 millimeter lens. So we've just gained from 60 to 93 millimeters. Now I'm in 4K mode, but if I go to HD, the gain is even greater. Check this out. I'm going to switch my video recording mode to HD. Now that I'm in HD, I can go from 24 millimeters all the way to 187. If you're shooting with the S1R Mark II, the super high resolution sensor, the gain is even more. Now you might be thinking, I don't want it to crop all the time. I want it to use the full sensor width until it kind of has to. There's an option for that too. Under the hybrid zoom settings, you can choose whether you want the effect to happen at the wide angle or not. Essentially, if it's off, then the crop zoom doesn't start until you've zoomed in a little bit. So your widest angle views are always using all of the glass. This is the kind of setting that if you're going to use it often, you don't want to be digging into the menus for. So I definitely recommend assigning it to a function button. And I've already done a video in this short series about how to program the buttons on your camera. And I've done a dedicated video on this lens where you can program the function button on the lens to enable crop or hybrid zoom, and then use the focus ring to control the crop zoom. Pretty cool. Installing ARRI Log C3 is a little bit of an odd process. You're essentially downloading a file from the camera to an SD card, uploading that file to a Panasonic server, entering the special code that you got when you purchased the update. That will then feed you back a new file that you will copy onto the SD card, put back into your camera, and load into the camera. A little bit weird, but that's how it works. It all starts with a web page, for the URL for which is down below, but also you'll get this when you get the update. And that is this Panasonic page, and the update that we're running is the DMW SFU3A. Within the camera and with a freshly formatted SD card, you're going to navigate from the wrench menu to the gear menu to activate. Under activate, you'll choose export serial code. Choose the memory card and start that process. Once that's completed, pop out the card and put that into your computer. Then go to this website, click on choose file, navigate through the Lumix SD card, open private, PanaGRP, PAVC, Lumix, ACTV, and finally you'll find the serial.lst file. Open that and click submit. Next is to enter the key code that you got when you made the purchase. Click submit again. Now that the new file's been created, I'll save that to the memory card. It's not going to actually download it back to the memory card. You will need to manually move it there. So locate your download and then open the memory card and navigate to the same folder we were just in. So that's private, PanaGPR, PAVC, Lumix, ACTV, and there's the old serial.lst file. We're going to now copy the active file next to that one. Eject your memory card, pop that back into your camera, back into activate, and choose import activation code. Choose the card that it's on and start. It says the function's been enabled. Just turn the power off and back on again. And now if I look at my shooting profiles, I should find ARRI Log C3. And now you have ARRI Log C3 in your Lumix camera. If you've ever tried doing a video shot where you focus transition from one element to another, and you want to repeat that and get it perfect every time, it's kind of hard to do manually. But with the Lumix camera, you can actually do it electronically and get the exact same focus transition every time. Check this out. Under the video menu on the second page, under focus transition, is going to pop up a dialog saying, please set the focus position. On the left side, you'll see it says position 1, 2, and 3 with the WB, ISO, and over/under exposure buttons. That's telling you that you can tap the soft button on the screen to activate them, or you can actually press the physical buttons on the camera if you prefer. Then you'll see a focus scale from the closest focusing distance out to infinity, and the small numbers 1, 2, and 3 all currently set to infinity. So here's the idea. I want to set my camera's focus to wherever I want the first position to be. And I can do it manually, or I can drag the focus box around the screen, zoom in nice and tight and continue to focus manually, or even press the AF button to autofocus on that element. Once I have the focus where I want it, I tap the button to set it. I'll tap WB position 1, and that's now locked in place. Plus the little number 1 on the focus scale has moved. Now let's set focus position 2. I'll go to this plant, tap the AF button, and set that as position 2. And finally, I'll do the same on the color chart on the back, setting that as position 3. Now that we're done, I'll press set in the bottom right, and we're ready to go. Now the camera is ready to activate those focus modes. To do that, I simply tap on position 1, 2, or 3 to change focus. I'll tap on button 1, and it focus racks to position 1. I'll tap on 2, and then tap on 3. And you'll notice that there is a countdown showing you how long it's taking to do that focus transition. Well, what if you wanted to go a little bit faster? You can change that. I'll go into the more settings. First of all, focus transition speed. It was set to medium. Let's go high next. I'll back out of here, and let's do it again. Position 1 to position 3 to 2. Quite a bit faster. If we go to super high, it's almost instant. Go to 1, and back to 3. And of course, the slower settings just get, well, slower and slower. I'll set it back to medium. The next option is focus transition record. What this lets you do is choose a focus position to jump to as soon as you hit the record button. So I'll go ahead and set it to position 2, jump out of here. Focus is already set in the background. I'll press record on the camera, and immediately it jumps to position 2. And of course, from here, I can continue to press the buttons to change the focus position as I need. The next option in here is focus transition wait. How long do you want the camera to wait after you tap the button until it does the focus rack? You can choose between 2, 5, and 10 seconds. I'll just set it to 2, back out of here, and now I'll tap position 1, 1, 2, and then it makes the focus rack. And that's how focus transition works on your Lumix camera. Did you know that you can set a self-timer for video as well as photos? It's pretty cool. Well, let's start with photos. In the photo menu, under Others, you'll find self-timer. And there's a few options in here that are pretty self-explanatory. A 10-second countdown, a 10-second countdown, which will then take 3 photos, great for family affairs, a 2-second countdown, and a custom countdown. If you go to the Set option, then you can choose how long that custom time will be, from 2 seconds up to 10 seconds. You can also choose to have a display countdown enabled when you have the custom time selected. When you're in the regular self-timer, it doesn't display a countdown, it just blinks at you as it's counting down. But when you're in the custom mode, you get a nice big number on screen showing you the countdown. We'll take a look at that in the video mode though. That's really all there is to see here, so let's go ahead and switch over to video mode. Back into the menu, and under the video's Other, there's a self-timer setting, and you'll see that there's an option, Self-Timer for Video, which we have to turn on. Once we do, then we have all the same options. The 10-second countdown. The 10-second countdown with 3 doesn't actually take 3 photos, it just does the same thing as the regular 10-second countdown. A 2-second and a custom one. Let's go ahead and set the custom one, and I'll set it to 5 seconds. I'll make sure the display countdown is on, and now we're ready to go. The last thing I need to do is actually enable the self-timer on my camera. Now, how you do this on your model is going to depend on your model. It has varied quite a bit across the Lumix lineup, so if you don't know where it is, you may need to check your user guide. On the Lumix S1 Mark II, it's right here at the top. I'll just switch that over to self-timer mode. You know you're in self-timer mode when you see the self-timer icon in the top left of the screen. And it even tells me what mode I'm in, C5 or custom for 5 seconds. Now I'll go ahead and press the record video button and we get this nice, pretty countdown. And if I want to cancel it, I can press the cancel button or press menu on the back of the camera. Once the countdown timer is reached, it starts recording. And that's all there is to using the countdown timer on your Lumix camera for photo or video. I think that's cool. Why didn't my camera get that firmware update feature? I'm a Lumix user, but this video applies to any camera brand out there. I get it. You bought a camera and a year or two later, there are new models, of course, and a year or so after that, the new camera gets some cool new feature via free firmware update, but yours did not. And that sucks. So let me explain why your camera didn't get it, and also maybe why it's not worth getting upset over. The most common reason is simply hardware. Camera sensors and processors are physically updated every camera generation or two, and a software feature that's possible on a current camera generation may not be technically possible on an older one. The sensor may not have the tech, the processor may not have the power, and that's basically that. Then there's the operating system. Cameras are computers, and they run an OS, and sometimes a feature is written for the current OS, but it may not be able to be written for an older OS. And if that sounds like a cop-out, remember that operating systems take years to write, and many new features are new ideas. So a feature that comes out today really truly may be impossible to integrate with an operating system that's effectively many, many years old. The next is testing. Every single feature added to a camera has to be extensively tested. Testing costs money. Firmware updates are free. So it may not make financial sense for the company to invest in developing and testing a feature for a camera that's several years out of date. And finally, while no company wants to say this part out loud, at the end of the day, new features encourage new sales. If you really want that new feature in that new camera, maybe you got to buy it. So other than that, why shouldn't this bother you? Now I'm speaking largely about Lumix cameras specifically because that's what I know the best. But if you weren't promised that feature when you bought your camera, why are you getting upset that you didn't get it later for free? I've seen comments complaining that ARRI Log C3 wasn't available for the GH5. Technical reasons aside, when you bought the GH5 in 2017, did someone say, hey, in the year 2025, you'll have ARRI Log C3 on your camera? No, of course not. When Lumix promises a feature will come to a new camera, it comes. But most new features you don't know about until the free firmware update is released. These new features are simply pleasant surprises to existing owners. Look, unless you drive a Tesla, when's the last time your car got a new feature for free overnight? No, your 2017 Toyota Camry cannot get full self-driving. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to buy a new car. So that's why. Hardware and software incompatibility, financial responsibility, and realistic expectations. Most importantly though, just remember that a new feature in a new camera doesn't make your older camera any less capable. It still does today what it did yesterday. So get out there and shoot something. What is a partially stacked sensor? You've probably heard this term mentioned when discussing the new Panasonic Lumix S1 Mark II, but may not know what it means. So let's start with the basics. A partially stacked sensor is a hybrid design where the pixel layer, which captures light, is separated from some of the processing circuitry. Unlike traditional sensors, where everything is crammed onto one layer, this partial separation has significant advantages, but also potential drawbacks. Traditional backside illuminated, or BSI sensors, have all components, pixels, and circuitry on a single layer. That's great for dynamic range, but bad for readout speeds. Slow readout speeds translates to rolling shutter. By moving some of the processing to a separate layer, that speeds up data readout, but potentially sacrifices dynamic range. Fully stacked sensors take this further, separating all processing for even faster performance, but they're more complex, more expensive, and sacrifice even more dynamic range. The partially stacked design in the S1 Mark II hits a sweet spot. It does deliver 3.5 times faster readout speeds, meaning less rolling shutter, but Panasonic has avoided a loss in dynamic range with their own secret sauce. This is what makes the S1 Mark II sensor so special. We get the upside and not the downside. Lots of YouTubers have done tests on the new sensor, showing rolling shutter and dynamic range performance, so I'd encourage you to watch those and form your own opinion. But now you know what the new sensor design is intended to achieve. The latest generation of Lumix cameras have a feature called false color built into them. Let me show you how it works. Into the menu, under the gear menu, and then monitor display, you'll find false color. There's only two things in here: to turn it on, and also the false color index. This is the kind of thing that over time you won't need to reference. You'll get used to the colors, you'll know what they mean, but for now, it's handy to be able to reference this. The colors indicate the exposure level. Purple is 0 to 2.5%, and that's considered black clipping. At that point, that means that there is absolutely no data in the shot. You have clipped the shadows, it's gone. Next up is blue, from 2.5 to 4%, and that's labeled as just above black clipping. So this tells you that if you start to see blue, then you know you're on the edge of getting to clipping, and so you probably want to be real careful. Then you'll see there's nothing between 4 and 50%. Once we look at the actual false color, you'll see that that is just gray on the screen. Then from 50 to 54% is 18% neutral gray, and so on. Now the chart that we're looking at right now is for one of the fixed color profiles, not for log. If you go into log, it looks a little bit different. We'll see the index no longer has the numbers, but it does have the same colors. So again, purple is now a noise floor instead of clipping. The blue is edge of shadow detail, then green is 18% middle gray, and so on. An important thing to know here is that pink one stop above 18% middle gray, is generally considered the ideal place for skin tones. So many people who use false color use it to focus on the skin tones. If there's people in the shot, as long as there's pink on the skin, then you know that you've got the right exposure for the skin tone. And then it goes up from there to yellow and red. Red is 1/3 stop below clipping in Vlog, but in the other modes, it is identified as just clipping. So now let's see what this looks like in practical use. I have this gray card here that is being illuminated by this little LED light, so we have a pretty smooth gradient from the brighter to the darker edge of the card. We'll zoom into that, and I'll enable false color. Go back into the menu and press the Start button, and that brings up false color. But this is a pretty inconvenient way to do it. If you're going to be using this feature all the time, then you should program false color into one of your function buttons. I barely use the under overexposure button on my camera, so I've already programmed that one to false color. So I'll go ahead and press that to activate false color, and we now see that green band in the middle of the card. Again, the green band is 18% neutral gray, so for a gray card, that's perfectly exposed. I'll start by bringing it darker, and as I bring it down, you'll see that the frame gets eventually blue, and then finally purple. Completely and totally gone information. As I bring it up the other way, we get back up to that green, and then if we keep on going, we'll see that we can overexpose it to the point where yellow is just below clipping and red is clipping. Over time, you'll get to know the colors and you won't have to reference a chart. But the most important thing to know is that green is 18% gray and pink is skin tones. The yellow and red mean you're really, really bright, and the blue and purple means you're really, really dark.